invite you to just click that. All right, everyone got their little pop-up? Excellent. Okay, well, I'm just going to mute everyone that's not muted for the recording for now, and we'll get started, and then you're welcome. We're going to have a section for Q&A at the end, so I'd love to hear from all of you. So today we're launching our social enterprise workshop series. We had done a series like this last year, and the goal of this is to help build a social enterprise capacity in New Brunswick. I recognize that this is open to folks outside of New Brunswick as well, and if you're joining from outside of New Brunswick, welcome. If you're joining from within New Brunswick, welcome as well. This project, Social Enterprise New Brunswick, is supported by ESIC, the Economic and Social Inclusion Corporation, and I see that we have some folks that from that organization that may join us today. So if they would like to speak about the project at the end, I will invite them to do so. And so the first workshop in our series is an introduction to social enterprise. So we'll have 11 of these workshops delivered over the next few months. The first one is just an introduction. It's an overview of some of the concepts so that we're all aligned on what they mean. And the rest of the topics were selected based on a survey that we had done to the nonprofit sector in fall 2021. So if there's anything that we're not going to cover in this workshop series that you'd like to discuss, I invite you to reach out. Happy to chat with you one-on-one, or we can potentially look at in the future workshop series, including that topic in there as well. So my name is Vanessa Paesani. I'm running Social Enterprise New Brunswick at the Pond-Deshpande Center, which is based at the University of New Brunswick. And Social Enterprise New Brunswick is a project that we're running within the center. To tell you a bit about the Pond-Deshpande Center, our mission is to use entrepreneurship and innovation to solve society's biggest challenges. And our strategic goals are to build the next generation of social entrepreneurs. And so for us, we recognize that social entrepreneurs can be both within the charitable or nonprofit sector, they can be within the private sector, social entrepreneurs can be within the government. So there's lots of places where we can apply entrepreneurship to solving society's biggest challenges. And part of our mandate or part of our goal is to ensure that we're supporting these social entrepreneurs regardless of where they're trying to create impact. And we're also trying to expand our impact of social innovation. And so for us, that means, like with this project, we're supporting social enterprise and nonprofits in New Brunswick. We're also conducting an early childhood education lab across the Maritimes or Atlantic Canada. And the goal there is to understand challenges in early childhood education and really be able to support that as a critically important pillar of society. So social innovation. And if you'd like to read more about that, you can visit our website, Pond-Deshpande.ca, and the early childhood education information is under New Lab. So in terms of social enterprise, I like to start with this chart or this continuum, and it's from ISED, so Innovation, Science and Economic Development Canada. Just recognizing that social enterprise right now, because it's an emerging field in a lot of ways, can mean different things to different people. So for us, like I said at the start, it means revenue. Well, I don't know if I actually said this, but in the social media marketing that you might have seen related to it, for us, social enterprise is a revenue generating project or enterprise launched by a nonprofit. But you can see that charity here from ISED, charities can operate a business. You can have a generally enterprising nonprofit where all of their activities are enterprising and market-based. You can have a nonprofit corporation with a social purpose or a co-op corporation with a social purpose. And I know in New Brunswick, there's 2 organizations that support cooperatives as well. You can have a business corporation with a social purpose. And one of my friends in Moncton runs something like this. It's called the Farmer's Truck, where they're a private corporation, but their purpose is social in the sense that they're trying to end food deserts, primarily in the US, simply because what they're doing is they're selling mobile markets to service food deserts. And because of the climate, there's more of a demand in the US. So they'd be a business corporation with a social purpose. You can also have socially responsible businesses. So these are organizations like Patagonia, for instance, where, you know, they're providing apparel. So they're not necessarily having a social purpose. They're not necessarily trying to change anything socially, but the way that they conduct their business is socially responsible. And I'm sure everybody saw the news in the fall where the main owner sold the corporation to basically be serving the social interests. So, and I've read a few of their books, and they make all of their supply chain decisions based on socially responsible principles. So you can have both businesses that operate for a social good, as well as businesses that are not necessarily existing for a social good, but operating in a socially responsible manner. You'll probably hear a lot about businesses that donate to charity. And, you know, within New Brunswick, I can think of McCain Foods, who donate a lot of funds towards charitable causes in New Brunswick and otherwise. And then at the far end of that, we have just a commercial corporation who's not necessarily thinking of anything social. And these would be the corporations that are a bit more traditional. I'd say a lot of corporations now have some sort of element of what we would call CSR, corporate social responsibility. So as I mentioned, for us, a social enterprise is a revenue generating project or corporation owned or operated by a nonprofit. And so, you know, that can look a lot of different ways. It could be that the charity or nonprofit registers as a separate business to then operate or meet this market demand. Or it could be a revenue generating project that the parent nonprofit is operating. But the proceeds are also supporting the mission. So another way to frame this, this is from a book, and it's very high level. It's called You're It by Alan Broadbent and Franca Gucciardi, who are 2 Canadian nonprofit CEOs or board chairs. And I really like the way that they frame different sources of revenue for a nonprofit or charity. So we typically think of government funding, which is one way that nonprofits and charities deliver their mission. We can also have membership-based organizations where people or organizations pay a membership to belong, and there's a charitable or nonprofit mission associated with that. You've probably heard a lot about special events. So these are often fundraisers that a charity or a nonprofit would run to raise funds to deliver their mission. There's sponsorships or partnerships. So often you'd see, you know, let's say one of those runs that you might see every fall, and it's a run for the Canadian Breast Cancer Society, and it's supported by a corporation. So this would be a great example of a sponsorship. We can have gifts and donations. So as you know, with a charity, that means you would get a charitable receipt. So when I donate to charities at the end of the year for my taxes, I get a charitable donation receipt. But there's also people who make gifts and donations to nonprofits as well. And then lastly, we have a social enterprise as a way of generating revenue for a nonprofit. And so at the high level, what this means is that a social enterprise has to be meeting a market demand. And so before you launch a social enterprise, what needs to happen is a market assessment. So what is this need that we're providing? Who's going to pay for it? How are they going to pay for it? How much will they pay for it? Who's the competitors? All of these types of questions that you would ask if you were starting any type of business. What's the market, and how are we going to meet that market demand? It also has to be properly capitalized. And what that means is a lot of organizations, a lot of startups, a lot of social enterprise might need money to get off the ground. And that might mean launching a website. It might mean launching a payment system. It might mean setting up like some infrastructure. So if it's a store, you might need to either rent a storefront, or if you have a building, it might be dedicating some space to that, hiring people, all of these different aspects that that the organization is going to need to meet that market demand. There has to be operating rigor. So we have to understand, where is this money coming from? Where is it going? All of these types of things. And as we think about that, and if the social enterprise, if a nonprofit decides to launch that for the reason of supporting their main mission, because maybe the funding or the funding landscape has changed, then we also have to understand things like margins and or surplus. So what that means is there has to be a way to track all of that money, understand what goes into operations or the cost of goods sold or overhead, all of these types of things. And that would be like accounting and bookkeeping. And then what is left over as either margin or surplus, whatever you're calling it, to then support that parent organization. And so there's lots of different ways that happens. It can be, if it's a separately owned corporation, that might pay the parent nonprofit or charity quarterly or annually. If they're within the same organization, and there's multiple lines of, let's say, government funding and social enterprise, maybe there's membership as well. All of these things need to be rigorously tracked so that you can, first of all, at the social enterprise level, assess what, in terms of the effort that you're putting into it, how much it's meeting or how much money it's creating for you to fulfill that mission. And then so this is the same book, what they call review and renewal. So it'd just be a way for the organization to assess on a regular basis what's working, what's not working, and then how do you develop continuous improvement for this social enterprise. So at the end of the day, what they're saying is there has to be a way for the parent nonprofit or charity to really take a rigorous look at what this social enterprise is doing. Is it meeting a market demand? How is it meeting that market demand? And then how much revenue is it creating for the parent nonprofit or charity? So if it's recording a loss, maybe it's a short-term loss, in which case they continue running it. If it's a multiple quarter loss, then the organization has to ask itself those difficult questions of, is this worth the time that we're putting into it? If it is, great, and if it's not, sometimes they would let the social enterprise go. And in the best cases, that social enterprise really generates a lot of revenue to be able to support the charitable mission or the nonprofit's mission as to why they exist and the change that they're trying to create in the first place. So I like to use this example of Habitat for Humanity because I think it's one that a lot of people have heard of. So Habitat for Humanity runs a Restore. So I live in Moncton. There's a Restore here. And at the end of the day, the Habitat for Humanity mission, and this is from one of the Habitat for Humanities in Ontario, they state their mission as mobilizing volunteers and partners in providing opportunities for families to achieve affordable and sustainable home ownership as a means of breaking the cycle of poverty and strengthening communities. So you probably heard Habitat for Humanity building houses in your community or elsewhere. And the Restore is a place where me as a homeowner, I can go in and I can buy things for my own home, for my own renovation purposes. At the end of the day, it's a store that people can utilize, and the proceeds or the surplus that they generate through that restore actually goes into supporting their charitable mission. So there's lots of examples of social enterprise. There's many that are out there. Habitat for Humanity Restore is just one of them. And I do like to mention that after the We Charity scandal of a couple years ago, sometimes there's a hesitation from the charitable or nonprofit sector to launch a social enterprise or to register that as a separate corporation that's owned by the charity, because there's like a risk or a fear. And at the end of the day, as long as the governance of all of that is rigorous, there's nothing to be afraid of. And there's lots of people, both locally as well as nationally, who have some deep expertise in structuring these in a way that reduces any sort of risk to the organization. I mention that again because, as you know, nonprofits or charities are governed by a board of directors, and these are people that are volunteering their time, but also as a result of volunteering that time, accept a fiduciary responsibility to the organization. So it's understandable that there's a hesitation at times to say, okay, like, what is this social enterprise going to do? How does it expose us to risk? And at the end of the day, it can actually reduce your exposure to risk by creating additional revenue streams, ideally, especially if it's aligned with your mission. And as long as there's a lot of work done at the front end to really figure out that governance structure, it can really create a lot of positives as well. And so one of the series in the social enterprise workshop series will be on risk and governance. That one will be in English, and we do have on our website, socialenterprisenb.ca, a recorded session from last year in French on risk and governance in your social enterprise. So because I'm not a lawyer, I obviously can't give any advice related to that, but there are lawyers in New Brunswick that specialize in these types of things, and many lawyers at a national level that do as well. So in terms of the social enterprise workshop series, Vincent Luc, who's joining us today, will be delivering this in French next week. So you're welcome to join us then, or tell your colleagues about it, and we'd love to have them join us because we do want to leave time for questions as well. On March 1st, we'll be launching a workshop on the Social Enterprise Project Fund, which is being delivered by CBDC Chaleur, and that will be delivered by Pascal Frenette. So he'll be delivering it in English on the 1st and on the 15th in French. And this is a project fund that you're potentially eligible for. That's also being supported by ESIC, the Economic and Social Inclusion Corporation of New Brunswick, to really help nonprofits in New Brunswick launch or scale these social enterprises. And it has to be related to ESIC's mission, which is poverty reduction in the province. So you can learn more about that project from Pascal on the 1st. We're also recruiting for our program called the Social Enterprise Deep Dive. And we're going to be running 2 cohorts of this in the fall. So the first one's called Vision and Validation. And this is designed to bring a group of nonprofit leaders together in New Brunswick who are at the ideation stage. They might be pre-revenue, or they might have just a small amount of revenue from trying out a few ideas. So that's what we mean by very early customers. And the goal of this program is to bring you together with other folks in New Brunswick who are trying things out as it relates to social enterprise. And throughout the program, the goal will be to take you from your vision to validating that vision or idea, and then ideally taking you much closer to launch or increasing the amount of customers that you have. The second one is called traction and growth. And that's if you're generating at least 5,000 annually in earned non-grant revenue. So that could be, if it was the Habitat for Humanity Restore, you're selling at least $5,000 of products in your local store. And so the goal of this is that these are organizations that have launched a social enterprise. They have some sort of market traction. So they've proven that the idea is going to generate some revenue within their community or within whatever market that they're targeting. And the goal in the program is to, again, bring together a group of organizations that are a similar stage and then help them get to the next level of growing their corporation or project. It doesn't have to be a corporation. I also wanted to tell you about an event that we're running in June. It's called the Social Enterprise Excellence in New Brunswick, and it's open for registration. So it will be on June 15th in Fredericton. And the goal is to learn best practices about social enterprise, network with others who are doing social enterprise in New Brunswick, and celebrate. So we'll have some awards for social enterprise in New Brunswick then. So I hope you'll join us. We will have registration for that live on Eventbrite. And so with that, we have time for questions. And I had the chance before we started the recording to start checking in with some folks on the call. But I'd love to hear some of your social enterprise ideas, what you're working on, what questions you have about growing, or, if you're not yet launching one, what questions you might have, or if there's anything related to what we covered today that you want to dive deeper into. I'm happy to talk about that as well. So what questions does anyone have today?
Vanessa, I'll ask. You mentioned we might hear from the folks at Isaac. Was it Isaac?
ESIC, the Economic and Social Inclusion Corporation. Yeah.
I'm interested to hear what they have to say at some point.
Yeah, in terms of like why they're supporting this.
Yeah, and what's you've talked a little bit about their mission and purpose, and I don't know if there's a deeper version of that, but yeah, love to hear that.
Yeah, well, Pam's on the call, so I can pass it over to her, and then Pam, if you'd like me to comment at all, I'm happy to do that as well.
Sure, thanks. And sorry, I was kind of hiding behind me eating my lunch. So
yeah.
Thanks, Vanessa. That was great. So ESIC is a sponsor of this program. ESIC is the Economic Social Inclusion Corporation. We are a Crown corporation underneath GNB, and we are basically in charge or house the provincial poverty plan. So we are actually in our third poverty plan, and out of consultation based on all regions, because we actually have 12 community inclusion network agents, so community coordinators within all the region in New Brunswick. And they actually have their own regional plan based on the provincial poverty plan from ESIC. And we are actually in our third poverty plan. And one of the priority action is make an investment through a new social financial fund to increase the capacity and sustainability of social enterprises with nonprofit organizations. So that's where we have partnered with Pond-Deshpande for the training aspect of it, for the help on the deep, for example, the deep dive that they are creating. So they're in their second year of this pilot project. And there's also a funding pilot project that just started with CBD Chaleur. And Vanessa's group with Pond-Deshpande, they actually have a provincial committee, standing committee, that is actually looking into having a provincial funding on the social enterprise aspect of it. So that summarizes a little bit. Not sure, Vanessa, if I missed anything or.
Yeah, I can just pick up on one thing that you said about the Social Enterprise Advisory Council. And I did just put the link to our microsite, socialenterprisenb.ca, which is available in French as well. We're in the process of getting that updated with a bit more information on the deep dive program and the Social Enterprise Excellence in NB event. But you'll be able to see the members of the Social Enterprise Advisory Council. And some provinces in Canada have a social enterprise strategy at a provincial level. New Brunswick doesn't. And so one of the questions that we'll be exploring is, what might that look like in New Brunswick? And how might we, as a Social Enterprise Advisory Council, support that? So that's in the works. We're discussing that, but it's in the works.
Well, I'll ask again if there's no other questions. So social enterprise, it's not really a tax status, is it? It's not. I'm trying to understand how that fits in organizational techniques and approaches.
Yeah, so in the US, for instance, you can register like multiple different types of corporations. In Nova Scotia, there's a specific type of corporation that you can register where you have to give a certain number of your proceeds back to a charitable mission. I think it's 30%. So a social enterprise is a way for a nonprofit or a charity to generate earned income, earned revenue to support the mission of the organization. And so I think, like I said, Habitat for Humanity is, like, for me, a great example. We've probably all seen a restore. Whatever their corporate status looks like, at the end of the day, this is a separate organization from their charitable activities that they're doing, where the surplus that they generate in the restores goes back and supports it. So let's say Habitat for Humanity, New Brunswick, I'm just making this up, generates an additional 100,000 of revenue surplus. So the income above all of the expenses each year, then that's 100,000 that organization doesn't have to fundraise from other sources, whether it's government funding or sponsorship, events, however they're typically doing that. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Sarah?
I'm still working on understanding social enterprise at a pretty basic level. I first encountered the concept when a group of friends and community members and I were kind of dreaming up potential local food sources and co-op ideas and all of this. So I was trying to read about social enterprise and communicate it to the group. And there were so many questions that came up, and I realized I didn't understand it as well as I thought I did. So that's mostly just why I am here today, just to kind of try to understand the concept better. But so what I understand is that it is primarily for nonprofits, but you can introduce, like at one of those first slides showed that kind of scale of like nonprofit to corporate. So you can introduce social responsibility to varying degrees across different kinds of organizations and even in the public sector, you're saying, but it's not really a social enterprise unless it's nonprofit. Is that?
Yeah, so yeah, and I find one thing that happens, because this is an emerging field, like we get kind of caught in the language. So I would generally call a business with a social purpose, I would call that a social venture. If you were going to apply for support for a social enterprise at, let's say, ACOA, they're going to consider a social enterprise to be an activity or a corporation run by a nonprofit. And then we have, like I said, socially responsible business corporations. So I don't think Patagonia, as that example, just to keep with that same one that I had used, would call themselves a social enterprise, but they would probably identify with the label of being a socially responsible business. If we think about commercial corporations, I live in Moncton. There's a large mining corporation just down the street, actually. And they do a lot of corporate social responsibility, which is actually very common in the mining sector. And they have their lead lawyer who's actually responsible for tracking all of that stuff. So there's lots of different ways to think about it. And in some ways, the legal status, so whether it's a nonprofit or for-profit or a charity or whatever, it just changes the way that the governance of the organization happens. So as you think about, Sarah, like your specific example where you were trying to organize a project with your friends, like what felt confusing to them about either the term social enterprise or like how you'd structure it?
It was a while ago now, so I'm not totally remembering exactly where the confusion was, but I think maybe I was reading some American documents where it was like I remember the kind of 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, like province people, or sorry, not province people, planet, profit, I think it was.
Yeah.
And how that fits into it and how that would fit then into the co-op model. And yeah, I'm not entirely sure, but.
Well, and even within a co-op, you can register legally a nonprofit cooperative or for-profit cooperative. And again, that just changes like some of the governance of how the organization gets delivered. But there are lawyers who help you understand this. And so if you have a specific idea, they'll often be like a lawyer who's interested in helping and having your business over the long term, who may give you some time in helping you understand, what specific structure do I need to be able to achieve what I want. Another example, I know a woman, SD Art, they're based in Fredericton. So she had started as a for-profit corporation, discovered that through trying to deliver what she was trying to deliver, she realized, okay, I think what I'm doing is better as a nonprofit or a charity. Changed to be a nonprofit, and now she runs a number of different programs and social enterprises under that. So, it can change over time too, like what you're trying to do. And that's part of, in the book, when they're talking about review and renewal, it's continuously asking the question of like, is the structure and the governance of what we're doing still aligned with what we're trying to achieve? And I think that's one thing that the nonprofit sector does well, is by starting with the vision of like the desired future that we want to create and articulating a mission of how we're going to do that. That then gives it's like a North Star of like, this is what we're trying to do. And with Habitat for Humanity, for example, it's affordable and sustainable home ownership as a means of breaking the cycle of poverty. So the Restore helps people, let's say, renovate their homes at an affordable and sustainable home ownership. So it's a social enterprise, but it's directly supporting their mission of what they're doing as well. So I think that's one thing that, regardless of the project that you're looking to either launch or scale, the clearer you are on what the mission is, the more it can direct the activities that you need to do, or the markets that you can pursue. Yeah. Does that answer your question? Any further questions on that? No. Awesome. Anyone else?
Well, I'm just looking for, I don't know, for expertise on coming in and analyzing your current social enterprise, like, and the cost analysis on that. Is there any sort of organization that you could direct me towards to help us with that?
Yeah, and Mike, I know that you said you're operating at least 3 or 4 social enterprises. Is that correct?
Yes, we have a thrift store, pallet industry, and we're currently in the process of setting up a redemption center as well. And we're not for profit, and I'm run by a board of directors. And to stay in compliance with the new standards that government's put forth, because we're heavily government funded, and then our social enterprises create the revenue that we're putting back in to create paid employment for the individuals that we're providing the service to. So in that essence, the board was wondering whether or not we should separate all these social enterprises. And you had mentioned about a parent company, all the money coming back into our organization as a whole. But under what my understanding behind it is that we can operate the same way that we're operating now under the same charitable number, and then you don't have all that extra paperwork and all that stuff that comes along with it. But I'm just not sure if we're doing it the right way, if there's a better way. That's why I'm here, I guess.
Yeah, and just another question for you. So when the board raised this question, I'm assuming they're concerned about a potential risk. Can you help me understand what that risk for them is?
Well, with the new government standards, ideally what the government's looking at doing, it's an employment first model.
Yeah.
And what they want is the individuals going out in the community and working and making a meaningful wage, minimum wage or greater, depending on the situation. And unfortunately, due to our setting, being in a rural setting, there's just no jobs. So we had to think outside the box when they did these standard changes to create the jobs in-house here to employ so many of them that were capable of doing the job. We also have some people that aren't quite there yet that we're still in the process of training through our program too as well to reach that goal. I don't know if that answered your question or not.
Yeah, I think so. So is the concern that you're employing these people within the charity?
Yes, kind of. Like, I think my board of directors was looking at saying, should we separate these 3 companies, or not companies, but the 3 different social enterprises? They didn't accept that term when I brought forth a proposal and set my new plan into motion. I consider all of these social enterprises because it's all tied, and you solidified that earlier by saying it's all tied into our mission. Our mission now has slightly changed due to the standards, but is to create a work environment for the individuals, to provide training for them and one-on-one support, or job coaching, I guess is the term we use, to facilitate the necessary skills to acquire to be in these positions.
And you're a charity?
Yes, we have a charitable number, yes.
Yeah, so then, I would, based on what I'm understanding you to say, it sounds like it would be worth your time to consult with a lawyer. So the 2 questions that come up for me are, do these activities, such as the thrift store and the redemption depot that you're going to set up, like, did they get you far enough away from your charitable objects that it puts your charity at risk? In which case, and I'm assuming that's why the board raised these questions, because they're the stewards of the charity. so that they're responsible for asking, is this getting us away from our charitable mission? And then if the answer is yes, and I don't have that answer for you, then yeah, then it might be worth pursuing, okay, like let's set up this separate organization for this line of activity that we're doing and this line of activity. And then they're maybe all owned by the charity. And again, a lawyer can advise you on the best way to do this. But then, you can have the same bookkeeper or these types of things, and they're just accounting for all of these expenses. And, you probably need different bank accounts, and different, let's say you're using QuickBooks, probably different, like, let's say there's 3 businesses, 3 different QuickBooks accounts, but there's a way for that all to get reported back that allow you to keep track of this.
We actually already do that
Okay.
to an extent, and it holds us accountable so we can see what kind of revenue that we're bringing in and account for the money coming in, the money that went out. Like, I just need someone with a little bit more expertise to come in and analyze that separate little social enterprise as a whole. I don't have that expertise, I guess, to look at like power bill, how much we're paying out in wages as opposed to how much we're bringing in, and I can figure some of that out, but I guess I'm just looking at the long-term viability of these social enterprises and whether or not it's worth us to continue or to revamp it and shut it down, or where to go from here, I guess, due to the new standards.
Yeah. So yeah, and then like if it sounds like the first question is maybe like a business question of like, is this generating enough for us to make it worthwhile? And if it is, then it becomes that legal question of how do we structure it. So Mike, you might be a good candidate for the social enterprise deep dive for the traction and growth. Yes, I don't know if Vanessa, if you could put the link in there. I don't know if you have it. If not, I will do it, or Mike, I will follow up directly with you. Yeah, that's what I'm hearing you say. It's like, is this worth our efforts? And if it is, how do we structure it? Is that what you're asking?
Yes, yeah, exactly. And I think I got some information today, even though this is just an introductory thing.
Yeah.
There's so much confusion surrounding and what concepts as a social enterprise and what does not, right? And we just want to do it the right way to stay in compliance and make sure that we're not putting our mission or our charitable status at risk, right? At the end of the day. I did sign up for the next one you mentioned earlier on March 1st. It's for
The
funding
question.
for do you think an organization like myself would qualify for something like that?
Based on my current understanding of the criteria, because you're doing poverty reduction, because it's around employing people with barriers to employment, I think so. I don't know, Pam, if you had any thoughts on that about the what Mike's doing and if he'd be eligible. If not, Mike, Pascal will be there on the 1st, and you're welcome to reach out to him before that too. But he is administering the program, so he would have like the full criteria for that. Yeah. But yeah, I think it's a good question. And honestly, I think you're asking yourself the right questions. I know that the standards changed fairly recently, and I know that what you're trying to do is create those employment opportunities. And then the only question is, like you said, like, does it fall within your charitable mandate? So that's great. I see there's someone here from ECW. I don't know if you be willing to.
Hi. Oh, sorry, I got my camera off too.
Yeah. So, hey, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Good. And I just drew attention to you here because I know, so this organization participated in our deep dive last year, and you folks you're in a rural area as well, which I think would be relevant to Mike. And and you have a number of social enterprises running. So I wondered if maybe you could comment briefly on that, and maybe that would be helpful
Sure.
in terms of some framing.
So my name's Aria. I'm project manager for Project Village Car Share, which is a membership-based car share service that we have operating in St. Andrews, St. Stephen, and we actually just launched on Grand Manan a few weeks ago. So they can sign up. They pay a membership fee annually or monthly, whatever they decide, and then they pay per minute in the vehicle, essentially. It's an electric vehicle, so it reduces GHG emissions, which was the main goal. And it also provides a transportation service, kind of a unique transportation service, I guess, in our area, since we don't have any transportation just for the general public. And then our other one that we're doing, Project Village Indoor Farm and Living Lab, is we've bought the old grocery store across the street from our office in Blacks Harbor. And essentially they closed down the grocery store, which put Blacks Harbor in a food desert. So we are transforming that to be a year-round indoor farm where people can come buy their vegetables, leafy greens, herbs, stuff like that. So we're getting vertical grow towers. So we're going to do like aeroponics and stuff like that. So the idea is that we're feeding our community because there's no grocery store here within like 20 kilometers, I think is the closest one. And then you have the transportation issue. So we're trying to combat that as well. So they'll be able to come purchase their leafy greens, vegetables, all of that good stuff, which will kind of go back into funding the farm. And we also do have government assistance for both of those projects.
Yeah, and I don't know if you have those structured as all separate corporations, but they're all clearly like related to your mission. So similar to what you're doing, Mike, in the sense that you're running all of these projects that are meant to like support the core of what you're doing, which is, what she just described too. So there's like all these different projects, no grocery store, no transportation, but they're all like separate but supporting the same mission. Yeah, go ahead.
So we also had Project Village Housing, which, because it didn't directly support our mandate, because we're not in the business of developing apartments, so it kind of spun off into its own NGO. I don't know if that would be helpful at all for you, Mike. But the ones like the car share, which is reducing greenhouse gas emissions, directly supports ECW's mandate, as well as the farm, because it's all done like it's being retrofitted as a green building. So we're using like geothermal and stuff like that. So that also directly supports our mandate. But with the one that didn't, we had to kind of spin it off into its own thing.
Yeah, we have that, or we have the Macadam Harvey Food Bank too as well, and we transport, due to the logistics of the service area that we provide, we transport food. We got funding for a van to transport the food to people that don't have transportation, and we also looked into a grant. We do a community or a garden every year. We get funding for that to put in a garden every year, and I looked at seed containers that could be retrofitted to do the leafy green kind of thing. It kind of what's going on down in Blacks, on a smaller scale, of course. But we were looking into that as well. We're kind of really diverse in what we do here. But all of it comes back to providing for people in need at the end of the day. So, no, that's good information. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. And Ishan, I see that you're here. I don't know if you have any questions before we end for the day.
Okay, thanks for the session. I'm a UNVP student and looking for to understand what is the social enterprise and how things move the Frederickshire. Yeah. Thanks.
Awesome. You're welcome. Awesome. Well, yeah, thanks everyone for your time. And you can see in the chat, and I think you maybe took some notes, but Pam had put the link to apply for the social enterprise deep dive. So if you're interested, we welcome that. And if you'd like to discuss it before you apply, I'll just put my email in the chat as well. Happy to chat about it. And also happy to chat about in more detail about anything that we discussed today. And you'll see that Pam also put the coordinates for Pascal, who is administering the CBDC Schiller Social Enterprise grant. So if you have any questions about that, we'd be happy to talk about that. And in particular about the grant, Pascal would have the most detailed information because he's delivering it. So thanks for your time today. I'm going to end the recording, but like I said, we hope that this isn't the last conversation about social enterprise that we have. I hope that you'll join us for the others in our series. So as I mentioned, the next one will be on this grant that's delivered by CBDC Schiller. They also have a social enterprise loan that's been available for a number of years. And we'll be talking about risk and governance, staffing, marketing for social enterprise throughout this series. So I hope that you'll join us. We'll be having sessions in English and French. We're also, as I mentioned, accepting applications for the deep dive. And at minimum, we hope you'll join us for the Social Enterprise Excellence in NB event in June. Thanks so much for your time and hope to see you next time.